All right. Welcome, everybody. This is the 2019 Refresh Midwinter Conference sponsored by Homeschool Connections. I'm your host, Lisa Mladnich, and our next guest is a wonderful homeschooling mom, Jenny Bales. Many of you may have heard of Jenny. Her topic is great for this time of year. Homeschooling is hard. Burnout is real. Jenny will unpack tips and strategies for self-care, as well as practical ways to create a homeschool that works for you and for your family. Hello, family in the background. And we'll finish up with a Q&A in the chat, so you can definitely ask Jenny some questions toward the end. And now I'd like to tell you a few things about Jenny. Jenny Bales is a Catholic homeschooling mom who is passionate about encouraging and connecting mothers through their homeschooling journeys. She and her husband of 19 years live in North Texas with their 4 children, ages 6 to 16, who have been homeschooled all their lives. Jenny is addicted to hot, sweet tea. We were just talking about our drink addictions, right? Our hot tea, dark chocolate, red wine, and mystery novels. I'm with you. And cannot resist an opportunity to coordinate a conference, a retreat, co-op book study, social group, or a mom's night out. I want to be your best friend. She loves to reflect on all aspects of Catholic homeschooling through the lens of our incredible Catholic faith. And Jenny says, my homeschool philosophy is whatever works, with a smattering of literature-based learning, Charlotte Mason, and classical elements. You can join Jenny in her conversation at Facebook, where you'll find her, I'll put it in the chat, Heart of a Mother, and is it by Jenny?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, by Jenny, right? And also, and I jotted this down. Where did I put it? Jenny, give us the name of your new website, too. We've got a website for Jenny.
.net.
Okay, so heartofamother.net. So you can take a look at that, find Jenny there, and enjoy her company. Welcome, Jenny. Thank you so much for joining us in the middle of your busy day. That's a challenge. And would you mind starting us off with a brief prayer just to begin our session?
Absolutely. This is important. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Oh Lord, we give you thanks and praise for the privilege of homeschooling. We thank you for the children whom you've given and entrusted to us. We thank you for our spouses who encourage us in this vocation. We thank you for all those you put in our life to inspire and guide us along this journey. Jesus, you were taught by our Blessed Mother's love, St. Joseph's hard work, and God the Father's wisdom. Help us to imitate the charity of your holy family in our own homeschools. Please give us this day the heavenly graces we require to guide our children to a greater love of you. And may our hearts always be accepting of the holy will of our Father in heaven. We surrender this hour and every coming hour to you as we begin anew to love and serve.
Thank you so much. I needed to hear that. Okay, so this conference is all about getting refreshed, and yet at this time of the year, and that's why refresh at this time of year, a lot of us are starting to feel either in danger of burning out, or we're losing our enthusiasm, or we're counting the minutes to summer vacation. Is there, to your mind, Jenny, is there any magic formula for us avoiding burnout?
No, unfortunately not.
All right.
You know, it's just like mothering, homeschooling, all those things that are really, really important and depend upon people. There's no one size fits all. But I know we talked a bit, that burnout is a real thing because homeschooling is really hard work. And the key, I think, to both preventing, avoiding, and overcoming, however you want to say it, burnout is really just looking at yourself and looking at where you are and where you're going and what's working and what's not. So if there's a key, that's it, but it's very personalized.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of just kind of a little self-acceptance going on there.
Absolutely, because obviously if you're in a situation where you're just feeling worn down and you're really just not certain how to go forward, or survival mode, I guess we call it, you have to stop and you have to think, well, what is it causing this? What are the circumstances? What are the challenges? And you could probably come up with some solutions for some of those. But I found the reality is some of those things you're not going to be able to change. You have to learn to accept them and learn to realize this is my season and it's hard.
What are the typical seasons that you recognize particular challenges? Just some big chunks for us, Jenny.
Sure. No, obviously when all you have are littles and you're just starting to homeschool, regardless of how many you have, it's a challenge to start the process of homeschooling, especially when you're caring for babies and toddlers and whoever else is there. It gets a little bit easier as your oldest gets older, but then you also kind of hit this change when you start middle school and then again in high school, and especially if you're one of those mamas who has both ends of the spectrum and you're waking up early with the babies and all night and the teenagers want to stay up at night. Those are the people that are, kind of really struggling. And I can't, I have to mention too, and the outside things that happen, illness in the family, death in the family, conflict in the family, just situations with jobs and moves and those kinds of things. Those are like key times when burnout is a real risk, in addition to day-to-day.
Yeah. So what would you say were some good, just general strategies for moms to sort of head off the crash and burn that can happen if we're pushing too hard?
Well, I think they say the only thing you can change is yourself, really, when you're dealing with these other people. So you have to take a look at yourself. Are you caring for yourself? I mean, bare minimum. Moms don't get enough sleep. We don't eat enough nutrition half the time. And maybe we have health issues that we put to the back burner because of, our family comes first. But looking at yourself, are you connected with God? Are you connected with your family? And are there things that you can do to help just your, burden? Kind of looking at that. But I think one thing that's important to me when I have grown past periods of burnout and now I'm looking towards, okay, I don't want to do that again, is, regularly looking inward and regularly taking time to either go to adoration or just take a day off from school where we're kind of milling around and I can reflect. Because I think that as moms, we don't have quiet, so we have to create times when our brains can actually think about how things are going because the demands on us are constant. So that's like the key first strategy, I think, is to find a way, whether you have, even if it's after bedtime or you have someone watch the kids or you're sitting with the kids outside while they're playing and you just intentionally say, I need to think, what are my issues right now? And how can I address some of those so I don't feel quite so depleted?
And do you have for yourself any kind of a mental checklist as far as the kinds of obligations that drain your time and energy? What's that like for you, Jenny?
Good question. For me, so I plan every 6 to 8 weeks teacher work days, and I call them teacher work days in my brain because I was a teacher and that just makes sense. But they're really times when I'm going to stop and say, okay, what are the things that drive me crazy right now? What are those things that just drive me bonkers? And it might be a math situation, but it might be like one of my biggest triggers of just frustration is getting out the door with my children. Anybody else? So like when I see that, I used to be better about keeping everything we needed in the right place or planning enough time to leave or whatever that is. So I can kind of evaluate and say, when is it that I'm losing my peace? When is it when I feel the most stress and what's triggering that? And I have a few, set things throughout the year, especially at the end of the school year where I have a reflection survey I've done for Homeschool Connections before where it's really detailed and really reflecting on what's working and what's not working. So I like to look at that.
Is that something, a resource that we can provide a link for or maybe later put it on the landing page for people?
Yes, we can. I know that the video help page has the 2 previous webinars I did on that personal reflection. And so we'll have to look at that. And I'm not sure, though, if the actual I know the actual survey is in my Facebook group, but I'm not sure where else it is right now. Stick it on the website. I can do that.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, because just some questions to kind of really reflect are helpful.
I love that you said what drives you up a wall, because I feel like in every season there's something that drives us up a wall. Maybe we're not getting out of the house enough, or maybe there's a child that's going through a rough patch, or there's something external, there's something financial going on.
Mhm.
When you identify something like that, what's your response? Okay, I've identified something now that's really draining me, that's really a constant distraction. I know it's hard to give a one-size-fits-all, but
No, well, I think it's, for me, what works, might not work for others, but is to brainstorm kind of anything that could work to solve that problem without limitation. So I know always it's like, well, get help. Well, I can't afford to hire help, so it doesn't go on the list. But anything that could possibly help, if in the ideal world, if I had all the resources available to me, what things would I do to improve that situation? And, sometimes it's going to mean like very practical things, and sometimes it's an internal, well, I just need to change my attitude about how I look at this. So I just brainstorm solutions, and then just prioritize, pick one thing that I can maybe try or, address. A lot of times I'll go to my husband now and say, this is driving me nuts, and don't know which thing to do. Or I'll have coffee with a friend and say, what do you do when? I process a lot by talking. So that helps me to kind of bounce things off other people as well. But really, it's just get it all out there. Some people will call it a brain dump, and just dump it all down on paper and say, or out loud if you need to do that, and say, what is it that's draining? What solutions could I possibly come up with? And then kind of pick something.
It sounds almost like something that it would be neat for your kids to see you doing. Okay, mommy's mind mapping out a problem, It would almost be like a sort of an unschooler's lesson, just letting the child see you working out a problem. So oftentimes I feel like, Jenny, and I know we've talked about this, that we women are told that we have this great gift of receptivity, and yet we have a really hard time asking for or even receiving unsolicited help. What's going on with us? What do we need to do to change our mindset, maybe, so that we're not so isolated?
Well, I think in my experience, there's a couple things going on here. And I think it's really interesting that in the past, really couple of years, there's been a bunch of Christian writers coming out with books about friendship. And secular, too, just about what that is and what that looks like, because we've kind of lost that. And I think the reason that we've lost community, friendship, relationship, and that ability to ask for help or be among people we feel comfortable asking for help is just this loss of that of community in general. We're usually not near extended family. If we are, we all live very diverse lives and diverse schedules, and so it's really, really hard to find people that can help you that you could ask. But I think, as you mentioned, part of it is also just our American way to be strong and try to do this all by ourselves, and honestly not accept the humility that we can't, and not think creatively about solutions either. Part of that is we don't have time to really think creatively with all the pressures, but part of it is, talking with other mothers and say, we both have this problem. What can we do to solve it? Maybe that's a vulnerable situation that we're not willing to put ourselves in, to be open about the real struggles and the real challenges of this.
Yeah, one of your kind of, I would say, a mission that seems to have emerged in your life, Jenny, and I mentioned in your intro that you love to put together events and opportunities for women to be together. You said that friendship is really struggling, and I feel like part of that is that our our society has so over-sexualized relationships that women don't walk arm in arm down the street anymore. We're also more spread out than we've ever been, so we're now intergenerationally all rolling out the dough together in the morning.
Right.
We're much more isolated. So how do we get that need met without trying to turn our husbands into our girlfriends and expecting them to be
Yeah.
sensitive in the same way a woman would be? What do
No,
we
very
do?
important. No, yes. You know, key points. We have a feminine genius that we have been created for relationships. We've been created for community, and our hearts, especially as mothers, have this need for connection. And I've found that it is absolutely crucial for me to connect with women walking the same walk as me, those Catholic homeschooling moms that have done the same, struggle, gone through the same struggle or the same season, or are going through it as I have. Because it's very encouraging just to walk up to someone and say, oh, I have this problem. And they go, oh, me too. And you instantly feel better. I think there's a C.S. Lewis quote about that. You instantly just sharing that burden is key. And it is across of Catholic homeschooling mothers specifically that we're at home, that we are Catholic, so we're crazy countercultural, and we are isolated in a way because, our daily routine doesn't necessarily help us interact with other people. So for me, it's been, I've identified this need and I have sought out groups. I will prioritize in my schedule in my life getting together with other moms, whether that's with kids or without kids. For me, it's a blessing to be able to host events and lead events and coordinate things. That's just kind of the way I work. But when we've moved to a new city, I've sought out and I've driven. This is the key for us. I've tried to drive, to find the moms and where they are and connect with people in that way. So I think there's some prioritizing that really should happen that is hard to do because we have a lot of things going on. But once you make those connections, the practical thing is, okay, hey, who wants to go to the park this week? Let's go to the park on Wednesday. All the kids play, all the moms chat. We feel better. We can't go to park because it's, 20 below. Hey, who wants to come over to my house on Friday morning after morning mass and just say a rosary and let the kids play? As you mentioned, I plan retreats and conferences and so forth, but it doesn't have to be, a big thing, getting together for coffee with another mom. And once you've made those beginning connections, then because of our lives, it becomes texting and phone calls and messaging and Facebook and being online and interacting through Voxer and Marco Polo and all those fun apps that make it easier to carry on conversations as busy moms. But I do think that face-to-face is what we are missing and have to prioritize if we want to be nourished and fed and validated in this homeschooling journey.
I think something that you mentioned as far as getting together with other Catholic homeschooling moms, certainly in our homeschool experience, we get to meet beautiful women of faith from other, other religions, many other different Christian denominations. But there is a particular thing about being together with another Catholic mom. Can you just briefly address that? Why is that different?
I think that we do and we should look at things from a viewpoint that's different than another Christian might. We face some unique challenges as well in regards to just teaching our children the faith, which is very specific, preparing them for sacrament, getting them to sacrament, and living our marital vows, and the way that Catholicism encompasses the whole of everything. It's just easier to have a deep conversation with someone who has that shared understanding, because really that's what we're talking here is if this isn't, so what do you do for math, and how did your kid do at his soccer game? This is like, I'm not finding time to pray, or when I do pray, there's just emptiness, or I'm dealing with my mother-in-law who's just a cross in her, and I don't know how to respond charitably. So I think that the Catholicism is key. Not that I don't have friends who aren't Catholic. That's wonderfully nourishing in its own way. But you're right. There's something unique, just because of our worldview.
Yes, I mean, I love my evangelical friends. They're beautiful women of faith and they inspire me in a different way. But I love to be able to say to my Catholic friends, oh, I'm bringing it to Our Lady, or I'm giving this child to Our Lady, or, or I'm just going to go sit in front of the Eucharist. I mean, there are just certain things that are so important to us that you don't want to have to skirt around in a conversation like that. That's not the deepest connection you can have with a friend when you have to pretend or avoid a topic that's of primary importance to you.
And
And
the best friend you can find is one who's going to say to you, have you been to confession recently? Because that's a hard thing to be like, hey, you could use some forgiveness and grace here, but that's just not something you're going to get.
Yeah, love that very particular Catholic insight. Also, you talked about that unmet need of women getting together and kind of venting and sharing and being reassured by each other's struggles. My sense of lots of things that Jesus did, friendships and sharing meals together, that he walked through that to show us something particular, that there's an underlying spiritual aspect to that too. What has your experience been of that face-to-face time? How is that different from our social media connection, our phone time? What's different about that?
Well, I mean, from a purely, factual situation, face to face, you see emotion, and we women tend to be very blessed by emotion, and so you're not going to get that necessarily online or through texting or even phone calls. But there's also, as you said, this breaking bread together aspect of our faith that is part of the face-to-face connection. When you're having a conversation with someone, there is definitely the listen and talk and listen and talk, and you're giving and receiving in the same moment. Whereas you don't necessarily have to do that as much in other not face-to-face situations. And I think that it's much easier to become authentically intimate face-to-face because you can't hide, and you can pretend a little bit if you need to, or avoid certain topics if you're not ready to share, of course. But I think that God made us in His image, and by connecting with people and sitting next to people and sharing a cup of coffee or a meal or just praying together, together with our souls in the same place where two or more are gathered, that's powerful.
Yeah, I really think it is sacred. I think that face-to-face, and as you mentioned, this breaking bread Catholic culture of ours, that God unpacks things that may seem subtle to us, but are nevertheless powerful when we feed another person, or we take the time to just be physically present to them, as much of a challenge as that may be. And one of the comments here, I just want to look at the chat for a moment. Patricia was talking about being a teacher all the time. And how to separate between being a teacher and a mom, how to handle the yelling if she feels like she's yelling all the time. Let's have some sisterhood here.
Right. No, I'm a yeller. I struggle with that big time. It's hard. You know what, though? I don't think we actually should separate teacher and mom. I think that being a mother and teacher is the heart of homeschooling. I know when I was starting, they say, well, make sure during school that you're the school, you put on your teacher hat. But, I mean, who better to encounter the challenges of your children than a mother who loves them unconditionally like God does? I mean, we're mamas through and through, and I don't separate the two. I don't always remember in the moment, but when I think about it, I remember that every moment I'm with my children is an opportunity for virtue training and growth and character building and grace. And so if we're doing something schooly and there's a situation, I don't act teacher, I act mom teacher, where I am knowing my children better than anyone else knows them. And so then I'm responding in a way that is focusing on what habit or virtue am I trying to cultivate here through this schoolwork? Because it's not about all the information we're trying to pack in their brain. Learning is a tool that's good in itself. No matter what you are learning, the act of learning is very important, or especially in the early years. But just uniting those two missions, kind of how I approach that.
Very interesting to not have to separate the two, to not have to be your one self here and another self there. I think probably maybe Patricia is also just the inkling I'm getting that sometimes it's almost like the mother's day never ends. You know, because, let's face it, we're doing 14-hour days when we're homeschooling easily. A husband, God bless him, thank God for him, is probably working 9 to 5. Some are working longer hours, but he knows when he's done. Most husbands know when they're done. And so having that mom and teacher role can be draining as well. I want to just give you an opportunity, too, to talk about that we do set the bar very high for ourselves, don't we, Jenny?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially, today in homeschooling circles. We talked about how like 20, 30 years ago when homeschooling was just beginning, there were not nearly as many options as there are now. And so there's so much stuff out there that's wonderful, and all of it's very, very good. But it makes us feel like we're not doing enough. That we, because of the fact that you mentioned that we're never, ever really, truly done with our work in a given day. Like, we can't go to bed and say, it's all done. If you do that, tell me how. But there's so much out there that that's repetitive that we're doing that it can be overwhelming to just be at peace with this day, that I have given this day what I can. My husband has been a huge blessing in teaching me that, because when the kids go to bed, or now teenagers are not in bed, but when they're kind of done with our family stuff, we kind of clock out, and we give ourselves that permission to not interact if we need not to. Now, with teenagers, often we will invite them. We go back out and see them and interact with them. That's when they're at their height. But we have given ourselves permission, like after 8 o'clock, if we want to just leave the dishes undone, or we want to just leave whatever undone and sit and be, if he's taught me that's okay, because the dishes are still going to be there tomorrow. Now, I don't do that every day, but I think that there's a balance there.
And that made me, when you just said giving yourself a chance to just be, it made me want to jump into something else that you brought up when we talked previously, Jenny, and that was sort of like having a vision for your family life. But what is it we're about? And just, you can't get to that vision unless there's time to just be, to know who you are, how you are gifted and called by God, who you are. You are not your task list.
Right.
Can you step us into that? What is that to start to have a vision for your family?
Well, absolutely. It's that what you just said reminded me that we are human beings, not human doing, right? So it's about being children of God. It's about being a daughter of Christ. It's helped me. This would be one of the tips that has helped me a lot with avoiding burnout, is to write down that vision for my home, that vision for my homeschool in particular. And my vision for my homeschool, I keep in the front of my homeschool planner, so that on those days when it's hard and I just don't want to keep going, I can look at that and remember, oh, these are the reasons I'm doing this. And those things on that list change from year to year as I grow and evaluate things. But the key for me is having that in a place where I can constantly go back to it and say, oh yeah, I'm reminded of the bigger picture when I'm in the weeds of laundry and dishes and math and science, high school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you mentioned something too that from a book by Sarah Mackenzie. What was the name of that book, and what was the little envisioning activity that she recommended? That was so nice.
So Sarah Mackenzie wrote Teaching from Rest, A Homeschooler's Guide to Unshakable Peace. And I love the book. And every summer I lead a book group discussion on it. And I've done a couple online too, so we'll have to see if we can pull that out. But the thing that she encourages you to do is to imagine your children have grown up, they're off at college, and they're sitting at lunch table or whatever, talking with other students, and they go, what was it like to be homeschooled? And how do you want your kids to respond? What do you want them to say in that conversation and share? And then write that down as your guide to help you have that vision and help you create that direction. So it's really good. Oh, I can't hear you all of a sudden.
I forgot I muted myself when I was typing in the chat because it makes a racket. But it's nice to, you might even have to put it on your planner, but to find time to dream.
Oh, yes. You absolutely have to put it on your planner. You absolutely have to plan the time to plan and dream.
Okay, now there are some other questions and I do want to get to them, but I want to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit more about anything that we haven't covered. We've touched on the teacher planning day. Was there something more you wanted to say about that, just to give some tips for how to make that day or half a day or whatever it is set aside periodically? How do you reevaluate and what kinds of decisions are you looking to make?
Well, let me just say practically how that works sometimes for me. A lot of times I'll swap kids with another mom for, we'll take 2 days, and I take her kids one day and she takes my kids the other day, and that's our planning day. So we have real peace, and you'd be amazed how much we can get done in our own house without any children. So that's one tip. My husband is gracious enough that when he knows I need a day like that, he lets me go on Saturday mornings from 6 a.m. to noon, and I can go to the coffee shop, and then I move over to the library halfway through when they open, and just really plow through whatever it is I need to process. So practically speaking, those are the times when I tend to rely on other people, and if you don't have that, it can be done in small chunks. It can be done in, okay, the kids are playing nicely outside. I'm going to walk away from whatever really is right in front of me, grab a notebook, and sit somewhere else and just jot down some thoughts or think through some things in my head. It has to be very intentional to work, because you have to say, I'm going to step away from everything else that's demanding my attention and just spend this time. Of course, going to Math and Adoration is a really great way to do that as well. Those are kind of the practice.
So what kinds of things are you looking at? Are you looking at redundancies in the curriculum? Sometimes I know, very typical, I did this every year. My daughter's in college now, but I over-plan. I sign up for too many things. Do you get to the point where you're looking for redundancies, or the things that are working best and the things that are just gumming up the works?
Right. So I'll look at, for each kid, what's going really well and what's not going well. And if there's things that are not going well that I don't need, then we cross them off. I mean, there's no guilt now in halfway through the semester going, what was I thinking? We don't need to do that. I can wait another, he's kindergarten. I don't need to do arts. Let's wait another year, or whatever it is. So going ahead and being free to just knock that off the list. I know a lot of us have outside commitment and responsibilities, some that are optional and some that are not, that are often burdens. So I really look at that a lot. How much are we home? We have this fantastic co-op, but if it's taking away from what I'm doing and there's not peace in what I'm doing, then it might be time to take a break from that. I had a friend teach me a long time ago the concept of emotional responsibility, whereas even if something doesn't take up a lot of time on your schedule, just the very fact that it's a thing on your schedule, it's a burden for us. We take it on as another thing that weighs on our shoulders. And so I look very carefully at where my time is spent and what things I can change. I mean, homeschooling in particular, it's kind of looking at what we're doing and what's working and not, but even at, in the house, I'm looking at, why am I never mopping the floors? I hate mopping the floors. Well, I don't have a set time to do it. That would solve that. So I'm really looking at everything from what I do in a given week.
Okay, fantastic. I just want to go quickly to the chat because we just have a few minutes left here. Helen is asking, how do you handle children that are difficult to handle? What would be some tips on that child that's maybe a little oppositional or maybe not behaving according to what your rubric says their grade level should be able to handle, or whatever the issue is.
Gosh, I first remember it's a season, and that my kids are good kids. They're created good, Most behavior is communication, is another thing I remember and tell myself over and over. And I really try to figure out what the communication is. What are they missing? What are they lacking that's causing this? And quite honestly, the easiest tactic is to keep them next to you and have them be your little shadow to help you with things, or bigger shadow sometimes, and be your manual labor, but just be with you, because again, connection helps humans to feel whole. And a lot of times when I've done that with a kid and be like, okay, I'm going to stay close to you like all day long. I'm going to bring your work next to me. You're going to come help me make lunch. Then I can deduce what it really is causing that behavior, even if it's an ongoing thing and they're just constantly oppositional. Keeping them nearby and not leaving them to their own devices helps me understand them better and maybe come up with solutions. But each kid's so different that's what it takes.
A beautiful response, Jenny. That's so helpful. I wish I'd met you 10 years ago.
Me
let's
too.
See. Erin is saying, I find that it takes being quiet to find creative solutions, and it's hard to find that quiet time.
It is. It really is. But if that's what's getting at us, is that inability, then we have to prioritize things. I mean, my Lenten Moms group is reading The Power of Silence by Cardinal Seurat, and it's a beautiful book. And we're having lots of discussions about how to find internal quiet amidst the chaos, because it's not going to be truly quiet sometimes. But if our kids are all playing blocks and we can sit in the chair next to them and we can go into our little brain and try to do things, we have to get really creative in our time for creative solutions.
Mm-hmm. Amen. Amen. Mary Lou is saying there's a hole in her heart for the lack of that Catholic companionship that we need so much. And she's mentioning some resources, Karen Andriola and Mother Culture. Oh, Kindred Spirits for 35 years, except for the most important thing, that face-to-face time. But let me just say, Mary Lou, that I've made a number of friends over the years online that later we meet at conferences or a retreat or something like that. And then the Lord steps up our connection when we're finally face-to-face, but he's building something and he knows what he's doing. He sees your future. And so good for you engaging where you can. Suzette is saying it's very lonely and a serious cross not having other Catholic moms with older children like mine to be friends with face-to-face.
Oh, yes. And I want to speak to Suzette because my circle of friends struggles with, we have the high schoolers and we're still homeschooling, and a lot of our friends are dropping off and putting their kids in school, for whatever reasons. And I think everybody has to do what works for them. But that means we lose friends because our schedules are now off. There's not that opportunity to get together face to face, and that's sad. And we should mourn that. We should mourn that loss, that we don't have those moms. But like Lisa said, the internet is a gift in that regard, that we can try to connect with people. And I have a friend I met online. She lives an hour east of here. And every couple of weeks, she drives over to see me, and it's lovely because she can do that, because it's hard without one another, and it's a cross we have to pray for, the opportunity to see the other moms.
Okay, there's a lot of more beautiful witnessing and things going on in the chat, and I'm afraid we're going to have to wind up, but remember that you can find Jenny online. And Jenny, do you want to just I can pull that up we've got your The Heart of a Mother by Jenny on Facebook and heartofamother.net, is that right,
Yes.
Jenny? Heartofamother.net, okay. And yes, and for learning how to change the culture, Walter is pointing out, I was just going to share that myself. The link to the next presentation is in the chat right now. We'll be visiting with Ryan Topping. Excuse me. Ryan's an academic, but he's also the father of 9 kids. He's a homeschooler. He's fantastic. He's a super nice guy, too. He's going to talk about how Catholic homeschooling can change the culture. And before we run, thank you, Jenny, so much. your time with us here today really means a lot to us, and sharing your heart, but also really you've gathered up quite a bit of wisdom and some real practical know-how here, and we really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
Excuse me.
It's great.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
God bless everybody, and hopefully we'll see you in the next session with Ryan. God bless you, Jenny, and your family.
Thank you. You too.